In today's episode of the Finmark Presents podcast, I'm with Nicole Markisohn, and she is heading over as the head of marketing at Finmark. And Finmark is a very interesting product in the financial industry. It actually makes financial modeling easy. So I think a lot of you folks out there, specifically founders in early stage businesses or a smaller company business owners, definitely have felt the pain yourself. Otherwise, you can probably refer to your CFO. So today we're going to be learning, all about what Finmark is, how Finmark is helping their customers. We're going to diving a little bit more into product hunt today. A lot of you folks have been asking us, and Finmark has had very successful launches on product hunt. So we're going to be joining into that as well. So Nicole, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. So give us, the 360 overview. What is Finmark all about?
Yeah, so Finmark is all about making financial modeling easy. Yes, seriously, making financial modeling easy, specifically for startups and startup founders. So one of our co-founders, he's a three-time founder, and at one of his previous story, unfortunately, one small error in this behemoth of a spreadsheet financial model had one small formula error in it, caused a lot of problems. And so he, was able to move on, successfully sold that business, but kept coming back to just how difficult financial modeling is for founders. If you're lucky, it's accurate and correct, but it's probably still a really clunky spreadsheet that doesn't get updated often enough. It's really siloed between teams. It's difficult to, version control, things like that. So just having an accurate model to begin with is hard enough, let alone one that's accurately reflecting what's going on with your business, that lets you plan for the future, compare different scenarios, all of that kind of stuff. So our goal at Finmark is to make that experience easy, dare I say even fun and enjoyable. Maybe not fun, but at least easy. And so it's taking your financial model out of the clunky spreadsheet that's difficult to keep up to date, that's prone to things, human error and other difficulties like that, brings it into this beautiful dashboard model where it's easy to understand what you're building, and so founders can get back to running their business. They probably didn't get into the startup land to spend time in financial models, so we help them get back to what they're really trying to accomplish.
Very cool. Yeah, you mentioned founders obviously as one type of user for the product. Who else would be sort of leveraging the platform? Who's using it? Who's raising their hand and says, "I need Finmark"?
Yeah, so like I said, we target startups. So everything from the really small, individual founder who maybe is moonlighting or hasn't really taken the dive yet, all the way up to pre-IPO. So everyone from a founder who maybe has no background in finance at all to a fractional CFO who's maybe supporting multiple clients, up to a finance team within a startup. And so the benefit as you get further along in your journey, and maybe you have a CFO or somebody who's a little bit more seasoned running your financial model, which is great. But with Finmark, they can collaborate. The rest of the executive team, the rest of the organization, whoever else you want to invite in, can be invited in. They can see everything. It makes sense to people who don't necessarily have finance brains, helps make sure that everybody's on the same page as you're planning your financial future with your organization.
Makes a lot of sense. It's quite interesting. So it's rare that we have companies on the show that solely focus on startups, or on that sort of angle, and approach the market from that angle. I would be curious then, how do you think about the journey of a founder or in a small startup financial team or a fractional CFO? How do they hear about Finmark? What's sort of the path that they go through, or the acquisition channels that you guys are leveraging?
So right now we've got a number of different acquisition channels that we're leveraging, both on the organic, on the paid side. We've got a really robust content marketing program in place right now, because we found that this is a big pain point for founders. They don't know a lot about it. It's something that they don't want to sink a ton of time into. They need guidance on how to build a financial model, what's important, what's not, what do investors want to see. So we've got a really robust content marketing channel, and a lot of people find us through our content marketing resources. We also do a fair amount of outbound, some social media advertising. What we found, we're still pretty early stage. So as I'm building the profile of the Finmark brand, I'm coming back to just value proposition. This is every founder that we've talked to for the most part is just like, oh yeah, financial models. It's hard, it's in a spreadsheet, I hate it. It's my least favorite thing to do on my to-do list. I never want to get to it. And so we're using that problem language of, hey, we've been there. We know how difficult this is. it can be easier. We promise it can be easier. Just come on in, take a look, try our product, and we're pretty confident that we'll make something that you love.
Gotcha. You mentioned content marketing there. Does that mean you're starting like very high in sort of the awareness and problem space where people search specific financial terms for their modelings or specific formulas? Like how high up do you go in the funnel of the experience essentially?
We've actually got a really broad breadth to our content approach. So we have very detailed, specific things like we've got a glossary of key metrics on our site for a lot of founders. Especially ones who don't have financial backgrounds, they might be getting ready to go into a pitch meeting or starting to talk to an investor, an accelerator, and start hearing all these acronyms and terms thrown around that they might not really understand, or there's so many metrics, it's hard to know which ones are important. So we've got a glossary that just helps, for your average person who doesn't have a financial background to make sense of that. So in that sense, some of the things are really specific and detailed. And we also have really high level content that's more focused around business goals of how do you figure out, what are the best revenue drivers for your business? Here are some examples, and here's how you might find the best fit. So overall, I think the biggest theme is that we're trying to add value and educate. So in an area that founders typically don't know a whole lot about.
Very cool. What stands out to me when I was checking out the website prior to our conversation, it has like a very nearly calming effect. It's super simple, it's very clean, very nice, fitting into the topic of what you're describing, how it makes financial modeling easier. Maybe tell me, what role do you attribute to the website? I mean, you guys are more product led, as you were mentioning at the beginning of our chat. How do you think about the website?
So the website, and I'm glad to hear you say, that it was evoking a lot of the words that we were talking about. That's exactly what we want, is for just that experience with the Finmark brand to be the exact opposite of being in a clunky spreadsheet. You come into Finmark and okay, I understand this. It's nice to look at. This makes sense to me. And so in that sense, we want the Finmark website to be kind of an extension of our product in terms of that brand experience. You probably also noticed that the site is a little bit lean right now. We've got a homepage, we've got some pricing information, we've got our glossary and blog, which really make up the bulk of the pages. So really it's our storefront of getting people, making sure they understand what it is that we're offering and getting them excited to get in and try it. And again, being a startup as ourselves, it's a lean marketing team. We're limited in our bandwidth. And so we decided that we would rather have a couple of pages that just hit the mark, that show exactly what it is that we're trying to show, and that deliver the customer experience that we want to deliver, rather than coming right out of the gate with this huge bloated site with a ton of pages that doesn't quite hit the mark. So we've had a very kind of slow and steady approach to the website, but stay tuned. We've got some more great content coming, but yeah, right now it's a pretty lean site.
Very, very good. Yeah, I promised the listeners that we're going to be chatting a little bit more about Product Hunt and the launch, but I want to ask you one last thing about the website before we go in there. Typically, marketers are quite critical, and actually, I think you alluded already that you already have plans installed on how to expand content. Today, like, what do you think is sort of the biggest strength of the website, and where do you see the biggest room for improvement?
I think the biggest strength of the site right now is exactly what we talked about before. I think in terms of our overall brand feel and the message that we're trying to convey, both in terms of the content and messaging that's on the site, the overall look and feel. I think it really hits that mark, which is what we were going for. I think, and what really the next phase of our website is very much focused on, is that it doesn't get enough into the details of the product, how exactly it works. And something that we've noticed, a big value realization point in our customer journey, is when people see the product for the first time. They really see a financial model in Finmark for the first time. That experience isn't very accessible on our website right now. So I think that's kind of our biggest weakness, is just not getting people in front of the product fast enough. So that's what's next on my list, to bring that value realization point earlier in the journey.
Very cool. So let's talk a bit about Product Hunt. Maybe the first question before we going into sort of the ins and outs, maybe tell me just at the beginning, like, what was something that you learned personally sort of with your launch on Product Hunt that surprised you the most, or that you would have thought is actually different, or, what was your personal biggest learnings in that journey?
Yeah, I think Product Hunt is such a fascinating community, and this was my first launch on Product Hunt, so this was really my first exposure. And so I think on the technical side of the launch, it was learning more about how the Product Hunt algorithm really works, and I think that's an area where people make a lot of mistakes, is not understanding enough about how it actually works and the importance of momentum in terms of driving the type of ranking that you want to see. And I think the thing that I was most pleasantly surprised by is just how the word nice is such a wishy-washy word as a marketer. I don't really like it, but the community was just really nice and helpful. And it's really just a community of makers and doers and people who like to tinker with things and get their hands on them. And for us, we got really valuable feedback from that community on everything from the product itself to the website to the way that we were messaging it. And so, yeah, that was extremely helpful.
Very cool. Very cool. You mentioned that momentum and algorithm. Anything, maybe one or two hands-on things that you could give our listeners to the way? Like, does it mean, such a LinkedIn where you probably need to generate a couple of comments really quick, or like what have you found to be sort of the drivers?
Yeah, it's again, so all about momentum. And so the overall best advice that I received and that I would give is that your promotion should follow the sun. And so Product Hunt, it's on Pacific US time. That clock starts at midnight for when the new products get released on Product Hunt. If you or some subset of your community that you can rely on to go and upvote your product isn't going to be awake at that time, don't launch right at 12:01 a.m. You're better off waiting a couple of hours until you've got a solid cohort of folks that are going to go in and upvote right away. And so, yeah, and again, like the focus on momentum. If you've got a list of 100 people between employees and friends and early adopters that will go in and upvote, don't send all 100 in at the same time. Get a batch to go in, upvote right away to try to get you bumped up higher on the list. And then my approach was just refreshing that page every second, watching where we were. And as soon as our ranking started to stagnate or drop a little bit, that was when I would do another push and tell people to go and vote or post something on Twitter and try to drive people there. So making sure that you're pushing for upvotes when they're really going to make a difference for you.
Very cool. So maybe let's go through it a little bit step by step, if you don't mind, like a little excursus into your Product Hunt experience. So maybe what were sort of the key steps in preparation? People that are preparing at the moment, you read a lot about that you have to find your hunters, you read about the type of content you need to prepare. What were sort of the key things that you guys were doing to prepare?
Sure. So the hunter, I think it's certainly a benefit if you can get a well-known hunter to post for you. We did have that benefit from being in the YCS20 cohort. We did have access to that. I would say if you don't have access to that, it's not a deal breaker. Don't sink too much time there. It's helpful for that initial push to get you onto the front page, but you need that momentum to back it up. So I think you would be better focused on making sure that you're set up for success once you do actually launch. And so I think in terms of preparation, make sure, especially if you're not a well-known brand, which most people who launch on Product Hunt aren't, make sure that your copy, your messaging, your imagery is laser focused. That's not the area to cut corners. Make sure that you're spending a good time on quality imagery, a really solid video. If you can put one together, I think that's one area where I would have spent more time in hindsight on a product video. And the tagline, the copy, and then the maker response. I think so. All things considered is probably 500 words or less. It's not a ton of real estate, and so you really need to make sure that you're to the point and very specific about what it is that you're offering, why people should care, and then being in and ready to respond to comments. So I think making sure that you've got somebody carved out day of who's ready to devote their entire day to staying engaged with the community.
Very good. We had actually a community question, I think last week about this. I would just post that to you. They were wondering if they should be have only their beta list available from Product Hunt, or actually letting everybody into the product. Like, what has been your experience? What have you found to be? Do you see an upside or a downside in any of the two ways?
And just to make sure I understand the question, you mean letting people from Product Hunt into the product on the day that you launch?
Or into a beta list, exactly.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I think my recommendation would be to let from product hunt, that's a level of exposure that you're only going to get once. And so I would make sure that you're taking advantage of that opportunity and moving people through your journey as fast as you can. So if that's means that they have to go on a wait list and then, be invited in, I think that's fine. It's not best case. If you need to put off your launch for a couple of weeks to be able to open things up, I would do that. Just think, every barrier that you put in somebody's way, you're going to have drop off. And so you want to maximize that, engagement from your product hunt audience. If you're putting them on a wait list and then emailing them down the road, you're not going to see the same, level of conversion as you would if you just let them over right away. So that would be my recommendation, but certainly.
Makes complete sense. Makes complete sense. And last question on the topic before we're moving on. I would be curious, how would you evaluate a product hunt experience? What is sort of the success metrics that you guys were looking at? And how do you sort of, apart from the ranking in itself and the effort there, how do you sort of evaluate the success for the business?
Yeah. So we had a couple of specific goals around our product hunt launch. So first and foremost, for me on the marketing side, it was lead gen. I wanted to get the maximum number of people onto our site, signed up and into our product. And so in that regard, it was the single best day. It's still to this day, the single best day that we've had for signups within a 24-hour period. Another big piece of that, and this might be more unique to us since we're a startup that markets to other startups, is we really wanted feedback from the product hunt community in particular on our product, just because we know that that's our target audience and that's specifically where they hang out. So we wanted to get them into the product and creating a feedback loop with them as early as possible to start collecting their feedback on our product experience.
Very cool. Good. So let's switch gears before we're wrapping up today's interview one more time. We want to learn a little bit more about yourself, right? Even probably preparing for a product launch, requires a lot of self-education, and there's many other topics that a marketer has to dive in. How do you decide what to read? What are your go-to places, and how do you filter out maybe where it's just not adding value to your, sort of experiments and strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very, very goal oriented. I'm a numbers person. I'm very data driven. And so I like, setting a specific goal and working backwards, especially being at a startup, especially being on a lean team. It can be tempting to think, there's so many cool things that I could be doing. There's so many ways that I could approach this. But, at the end of the day, if your resources are in terms of budget and manpower are limited, you need to make sure that you're focusing in the area that is going to drive the best results for you. And so for me, that means once I've identified a particular tactic, something that I want to try, or something like a product hunt, I become laser focused on researching who's done this before, who's done this well, who's done this badly, and what can I learn from how they did it.
Mm-hmm. Any strategy or tactic that you're excited about at the moment, looking to the future?
Right now, we're doing a lot of experimentation with paid social, which has been, and doing some kind of cross-pollination between paid social and some of our other tactics, and just kind of following our prospects around the internet, make sure that we're delivering, a custom value-focused experience that aligns with whatever channel they happen to be on. And so getting to a level where we've done some testing on a number of different channels. We've got some initial results and just starting to experiment and refine.
Very cool. I want to wrap it up with some rapid fire questions. Sure. Are you ready for those?
Okay, I think so.
Very good. What's your last book that you read?
The last book I read, it's actually a fiction book called The Cave Dwellers. About it sort of reads like a thriller, but it's about high society in Washington, D.C. It was very fascinating.
Very cool. What is the one thing that the company is focused on the most at the moment?
User experience.
Mm-hmm. If there would be no tech boundaries anymore, everything is possible, what's the one thing you would fix for your role?
Data. All of the data I want in every platform, it's always correct and it's always up to date.
What is the last thing that kept you awake at night about the company?
The last thing that kept me awake at night, that's a good one. I think our customer onboarding communications flow. yeah, I spend a lot of time thinking about that one.
Makes a lot of sense in the context of product-led growth.
Yeah.
Very good. And if you don't mind, I would love to do like one sort of like time travel with you for 1 second, which would be back to the
Sure.
days of the University of Maryland.
Okay. Yeah.
If today would be your first day, right, heading out of education into the world of marketing, what's the one advice you would give yourself?
You know more than you think you do. Just start, do something, get your hands dirty, and don't be afraid to mess up.
Thanks a lot for being a guest on Finamrk Presents, Nicole.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.